Welcome to the Support of Ambition, where we celebrate creativity, ambition, and the journey of bringing big ideas to life. I'm your host, Danny, and each week I'll introduce you to inspiring voices from all walks of life. Artists, innovators, and dreamers who are pushing boundaries and redefining what's possible. This podcast is about the power of support, shared stories, and the belief that we're all stronger when we lift each other up. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Let's dive in. We're thrilled to be joined today by Rob Alicea, the award-winning Latino filmmaker and writer behind Leaving Normal Productions. Rob's storytelling journey has brought us a diverse and compelling projects like the heartfelt comedy series Adulthood and the eerie supernatural thriller The Hat Man. Through his work, he brings to life narratives that are both universally relatable and authentically representative of the Latino experience. Rob is also a dedicated advocate for Latino creatives as a co-founder of Latinos in Film and Entertainment, an organization devoted to supporting the next generation of filmmakers and creative types. So let's dive into Rob's creative journey, the driving forces behind his production company, and the impact he's making on the industry. Rob, welcome to the Support of Ambition.
Thank you. That is one of the kindest, sweetest introductions I think I've ever had for anything. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here and always happy to talk with you, Danny.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And yeah, thank you for spending the time. I really appreciate it. And we know each other well. We've known each other for a few years now, but I don't think we've ever talked that much about your production company itself. Sure. So that's why I wanted to rectify that, wanted to get in there and do that today. So can you start a little bit by sharing what inspires you to pursue storytelling, and then the creation of Leaving Normal Production?
Yeah. I'll try to give you it's a cliff notes of a 22-year journey, but I'll try to keep it as quick as possible. So, I like a lot of storytellers, I've always grown up loving movies and television shows. I mean, some of the first movies I remember watching, Nightmare on Elm Street, Back to the Future, and I love like the slasher movies of the 80s, probably why I ended up becoming such a horror lover. I went to Hunter College right after going to Xavier High School. So Xavier was a military. It had Army ROTC program. So, very regimented, right? No pun intended. So when I finally got to college, it was like kind of strange to have this place where you can kind of choose your own path. And for me, I really wasn't sure about what I wanted to do. So, at the time, an acting class was available, and I was one of these people where I wasn't as disciplined as I am now, and I was kind of slacking on signing up for classes. I was like, oh, there's an acting class available. This has always been interesting to me. Let me take it. So I started studying in theater, and just immediately something just spoke to me. I don't know. Nice. It's hard to explain the feeling. I think it's like whenever you find a passion, or, you find something where you're just like, I just get this and it feels like it gets me and it just brings me joy. So, I kept on that path, and for a very long time was pursuing acting as a professional career. And I had some really amazing opportunities and definitely some successes. But there was always also this part of me that always wanted to be a part of actually putting things together. Because even when I would be cast in a project, I always found myself wanting to learn more about what directors did and producers did, and wanting to be of help on set. So that led to me, writing and starting to direct. But again, all the while still pursuing acting. And then I think it was about 30, I had kind of hit this wall in my career as an actor where, it was tough to get me in the room because like I have a lot of tattoos, and, what my agents were saying at the time, they said, what you look like doesn't really fit your essence fully. So it's hard to cast you, right? Because sometimes, they see you as a guy with a bunch of tattoos. They want you to be the tough guy or this. And I'm not tough, even though I've played those guys at a certain point. But what was, a kind of life-changing advice, my agent at the time had encouraged me to start writing and directing. We were all, I'm sure, inspired by Lena Dunham with Girls. And, Charlie and Rob creating It's Always Sunny in
Yeah.
Philadelphia, these projects that, some of them started independently. And, with
Mhm.
Lena Dunham, creating this project that was like so personal. And, she got to do the project with the people that, were her team. And it was just so inspiring. And that was when I first created Adulthood, which was, loosely based on my life. And at the time where, I was with my guy friends and, I would say, hey, sometimes guys have pressure too, about getting older and figuring it out,
Mhm.
and what to do next and all that. And I hadn't seen too many things that I felt like really portrayed that, I guess, in a really honest way and not like trying to make everybody look cool. So, we would joke, we were like the poor man's entourage, right? Just like a group of kids that without the money and the fame and, growing up in Queens and, trying to figure out fatherhood and career and just
Mhm.
life in general. And, that one project absolutely changed my life. I have to give like the most special shout out always to Kevin Smith, because it was his talk at the 2016 New York Comic-Con saying, in life, we have a choice, right? We can be on the path of destruction or be on the path of creation. And he's
Okay.
like, I invite you guys to join on the path of creation. And at the end of that talk, he said, I give everyone here a challenge, dedicate 1 or 2 years to like pursuing that thing,
Oh,
and don't stop until you make it. And I don't know, man, it was like I felt like he had spoken to me directly, even though it was,
right to
so
the
many,
heart.
so many
Yeah.
people, obviously. And I was even just listening to that on a podcast. But yeah, so I sought out to make Adulthood. It was such an amazing experience. It was tough, obviously writing, directing, and also acting in it.
Mhm.
So I give a lot of credit to people like Ben Affleck and other people that write and direct their projects. But yeah, at that point, it started to get some recognition, which was really cool. People started to really enjoy it, which, you always hope it reaches an audience.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I talked to my producing partner, who became my writing partner, who's also my wife now, about, hey, maybe we should really, pursue this professionally. It was a good experience working together. People, like I said, are responding, and I want to keep doing it. So we said, all right, well, let's give it a shot. So we were working on our follow-up project at the time. One of the actors that we had cast, Adon Roca, fantastic actor. He was on the Murphy Brown reboot, and just like a great guy. He was a part of one of our projects. I was in talks with his management company because, when obviously an actor comes on, they want to meet the director and,
Mhm.
you have like a lot of back and forth. I started to look into their company, and it's called Inclusion. And it was all about, about obviously looking out for people, right?
Right.
People of color, helping to raise those voices. So I ended up submitting to them. I ended up setting a meeting with their literary department. We ended up signing with them, and we're with them for several years, and that kind of started the journey, if you
Yeah.
will.
Mhm.
But at the time, like everyone else, you need to make money still, right? So I was also freelancing at other production companies. And, I worked at places like MSG and was producing stuff for like the Rockettes and the Rangers. And
Okay.
then also moving to other production companies where we were doing stuff with like Showtime. So really, really exciting projects, things that I learned so much doing. But there was also still this kind of point inside me where I'm like, I don't feel as fulfilled as I thought I would. Like sometimes people say you get the dream, and it's not always what you think it is. And I think what I realized is I love the process of putting together stories and producing and directing and putting together projects. But of course, it has to be something that I feel connected to, right? I think as
Right. Right.
storytellers, you hope that you're working on things, and I wasn't as connected to those things as I am on the narrative side, right?
Mhm.
So, my wife and I, we sat down, she was my girlfriend at the time, but still we were living together, and, you try to be responsible and you're like, hey, I'm thinking I don't want to be at this job anymore. What do you think about that? And it was an interesting too, an interesting conversation to have because, when you're by yourself or you're single, you can kind of just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You don't have to really like think about it. You're kind of beholden only to yourself. But, when you meet that person who's that special in your life and this is the person, now all of a sudden any choices you make impact them as well.
Right.
And I was so thrilled that she supported me. She said, look, you're a really intelligent person and you're hardworking, and I believe in you, and I believe that you will figure it out. So she gave me her blessing. I put my 2 weeks notice in the next day. I said, I'd be moving on. And they were cool with it. Thank God. Of course, you don't ever want to leave somebody in a bind.
Yeah.
And then, I just kind of went to set out on my own. And, I really believe in this wholeheartedly, whatever you put out energy wise, you get back,
Yeah.
because I took that risk and I did not have a safety net. I only had like 2 more checks coming to me and very little savings at the time. I ended up getting an amazing job producing a big documentary for
Right.
Ford Motorsports when they were
Okay.
doing their first ever electric Mustang. And that was like a thank God project because obviously financially it helped keep me afloat for a while.
Yeah.
But also too, it was the first time really where a project of that magnitude, again, even though it wasn't narrative, it was a bigger documentary where I was trusted with like a bigger budget and a big team. And, we
Oh,
shot
okay.
internationally and it was
Hmm.
during COVID. So that was a whole other added challenge there, if
Added
you
layered.
will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's just from there, it's just been, like everyone else, man, you take one day at a time, it's step by step. We find projects that we love.
Hmm.
Because I tell especially young filmmakers, like if I go do a talk at a high school or, just meet younger filmmakers on set, they'll sometimes ask me, like, how do you choose a project? It's a very common question. And I finally have that answer. It's like, it's got to be a hell yes or a hell no. I
Ah,
think at a certain
okay.
point in your life and career, right? When you're young, maybe do everything, right? Figure it
Yeah.
out, like try documentaries, do commercials, do music videos, do whatever, you can to learn and build a name for yourself. But then there comes a certain point where you really have this understanding that, to get one movie off the ground could take years.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you have to really, I think, find projects that you're like, hell or high water. I want to stay behind this project and I want to
Yeah.
keep moving it up that hill till it finally rolls down and we're going. So that's kind of just been my story again. That's like a Cliff Notes version of 22 years. And then leaving normal, the inspiration behind the name. I sometimes get asked that question.
That was
I
going
was
to
a
be
big
my next
rock.
question for you anyway. So
Oh, boom. All right,
there you
cool. So
go.
I'll roll right into it. So growing up, I was always such a big CW fan. I was in that heyday, like Dawson's Creek, for example, when they were in sophomore year, I was in sophomore year of high school. So I
Ah,
kind of
okay.
grew up with them and then really loved the show Roswell. And there was a quote by Cherie Appleby's character where it talked about, when you follow your heart and, you do it, you leave normal because you're not
Mm.
normally thinking about what's the most logical thing. It's just sometimes you just have to go with your gut and go with your spirit and go with what moves you and what you feel like you need to do. And I was like, yes. I was like, again, that speaks to me. So then that became the name of the company.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, you've had the production company now for a little bit of time now. You're working through it. You're using that.
Yep.
Has your vision for the company evolved at all?
Yeah, it absolutely has. Because when we first started, I was still freelancing, again,
Okay.
at other companies. So again, I was still absorbing. And that's another part of entrepreneurship that a lot of times people don't know, right? A lot of times people start companies, doesn't mean you have the cash flow to do that full time. It took us
Hmm.
a lot of years before it became a full-time
Right.
business. But, because of that, again, I was still learning, still absorbing, working, even as an assistant at places while I was still trying to grow the company. And eventually, and again, it should have been like, well, duh, but I really realized that like I really want to commit to horror because it's my passion and my love as a genre. But then, with my wife, human rights is something that's so important to her. And she has just such a love and a passion also, not only for horror, but for true stories and inspirational true stories. And that kind of became the second wing of our company. So biopics. And again, like just these undeniable stories.
Yeah.
Some, like my wife has found them in like People magazine and and this is how hard and simple it is. Sometimes we would just reach out to the subjects of
Mm.
these stories on Facebook. right? Friend them on
Yeah.
Facebook, send a message and say, hey, we read your story. We were incredibly moved by it. We're a storytelling duo and a company, and we'd love to see if we can meet and tell your story. And it's incredible how open people are to that. And that's been such a blessing too, to know that, like, horror for me, like, fills me. Cause again, it's like, I'm that kid who always, was, watching horror movies as a kid and still love them to this day. But then also having the opportunity to tell stories that, can change someone's life,
Yeah.
truly, tell a story or shine a light on an underrepresented voice, which a lot of times is a lot of that crossover too. And a lot of that focus in our work. It's really fulfilling. It really is.
Yeah. I understand that completely because that's kind of what led me to start up this podcast, The Supportive Ambition, is that, really shining the light on someone who you see as doing great things or has a very compelling story that you want to just share or amplify with as many people as you can. So,
Oh, thanks, man. It's a great podcast to have for people, because I think that, in our world, I think we always need inspiration. I think we need
mhm.
stories that can uplift us and also know that we're not alone, right? Because sometimes you might be pursuing a career and you're just like, oh man, it's too hard. I just don't know what to do. And sometimes just hearing stories of other people and saying, hey, like, take me. It took me 22 years, right, to get my first feature directorial debut. Some people do it fresh out of school. Everyone has their own story. But I think that's what's great about these podcasts, meeting people of all different walks of life,
Yeah.
hearing different
Yeah.
stories. And you really start to understand, like, man, everyone's story is as unique as a fingerprint, right?
Yeah.
It's like you
Oh,
could
yeah.
follow, I always say you could
Mhm.
follow advice to a T, right? Of a mentor or whatever. You will never end up in the same place because
Yeah.
no one is meant to. We're all meant to go on this wild and crazy journey of life. And that's why I love podcasts so much. I love listening to them, especially personal stories, because there's always, I find, a nugget. If you take one thing away, that one thing changes your life in some capacity.
That's very true. Very true. When you're developing a new project
Mhm.
for your production company or just your personal stuff, what does your creative process look like? Do you have
Sure.
any like rituals or steps that you always do to help bring that idea to life?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it kind of depends on where a project is, right? When it comes to us, because
Mm. Okay.
sometimes someone will come with a pitch, right? And sometimes a
Hmm.
pitch, it could be like literally a one sheet, which is, as it sounds, a single sheet, right?
Yeah.
Breaking down, this is the title, the log line, the characters, and, a couple of paragraphs giving a Cliff Notes version of the story. Sometimes somebody will come up with like a full deck, right? And it'll
Yeah.
be like very, very fleshed out. So in situations like that, sometimes it'll be, if we again feel that connection as writers, we may pitch ourselves to write. Sometimes, depending if we're like, hey, we're not the best people for this, or scheduling doesn't work out, et cetera, but we want to help, we'll bring on other writers.
Okay.
Sometimes, a project comes kind of like fully packaged, right? But I'll kind of give you like the creative idea, or I guess the creative process with us, like when we're writing, just as an example.
Okay.
So, one of the things that, we start doing is really fleshing out the story. So, before we ever start and get into final draft and start writing, outline the story, right? Figure out what are all those beats, what's that beginning, middle, and end, your act one, act two, act three. A lot of work on character development.
Mhm.
A lot of work on figuring out what are those character arcs. What are these characters? Where do they start when we meet them? Where do they end? And for me, this has become an ethos of mine. I always want to make sure that every character has a full life. Even if that life hasn't been fully realized in the film, at least for us as creatives and creators to know that. Because I always look at it like, even if you have a character that has one scene, make that scene memorable. I always remember Roger Avery talked about that when he did the Rules of Attraction. There was one particular scene where it's so memorable. And he talked about how, like, that actor, like, everyone still talks about that one scene. He was like, yeah, everything should be memorable. So I've always like really thought to myself, like, the guy who's the doorman, right? What's his story?
Yeah.
Why is
Yeah.
he there? Where did he come from? Because I think all of those things can have an impact. And I always want to make every character, I think, so intriguing and so interesting that they themselves could have their own movie. So that's another thing that for me, when I try to encourage young writers, I would say, hey, make sure you know all those characters. Don't take any one of them for granted, even if they have one line. Give
Right.
them that same careful attention as you would, your lead protagonist or antagonist. Um, so then, from there, obviously, depending if we're just producing or we're going to a producing partner, you'll typically then, try to get your outline approved, right? And the outline is great because it's a roadmap, right? It's
Yeah.
essentially like an instruction manual to the script, letting people know, hey, this is what you're going to get, hopefully, right? When we write it, this is our beginning, middle, and end. And the outline process is very good too, because a lot of times it can fix problems before they occur in the writing process. So it's one of those things that I highly encourage people. And I also tell writers, especially who want to go into television, it's something that you have to embrace and get used to, because a network has to approve your outline before you're even allowed to start writing.
Mhm.
So it's a
Okay.
really important thing, and that the structure helps. And I understand when I speak to writers and they say, it just doesn't feel artistic. I think a lot of times people feel like, the muse takes you over and a screenplay just comes out, and I'm like, maybe sometimes, and it's great if that happens. That never worked for me as well as I would have liked it to. And for any professional in the business who I truly admire, they all adhere to structure.
Yeah.
It gives you guidelines that I feel like allow you freedom. Um, and then, yeah, from there, once a script is done, there's so many different avenues, right? If for example, a film I'm working on now, that was a script that had come to us. I pitched on it as a director. And, I was like, hey man, like I said to the writers, like, I really want to do this film. So then at that point, we as producers were tasked with finding financing. They
Gotcha.
came with some financing to the table. We had to go to investors and financiers. Sometimes you go to bigger companies and you pitch and then they finance, or sometimes you want to pitch to a studio. I think a lot of times it depends how involved do you want to be, right? So for
Right.
this
Right.
one, with us and our team and a core group, we're basically at the helm, which is pretty awesome to just be able to kind of do that and have it feel like an extension of the experience shooting a short, but on that bigger level.
Hmm.
But also too, we have other projects that are signed to like other production companies and production partners. So
Gotcha.
it's such a like choose your own adventure in terms of how you want. And then sometimes you just sell a project, which that's never been necessarily a goal of ours. It may happen. And again, it's because every single thing we write is something that we love so much. We want to be a part of it. It
Yeah.
would feel a little weird to just sell it off, but I totally understand when people do that. And sometimes you sell a spec and the money's great and you can live for several years on that. And that's a great thing too. Again, it's everyone's careers again and desires. They have so many different ways to go, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess your background in your high school really set you up with that, structured work ethic in a way. So thankful for that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and that I'll say this though, the discipline wasn't always there though.
Ah, okay.
It took me a long time to get there.
Okay.
It was really when my wife Scarlett came into my life. She really,
Ah,
is such a, someone that not just because she's my wife and my partner, but who I admire as a person because she's so intelligent and she's worldly traveled and takes care of her mom and just finds balance to see her friends, but also has an incredible career as a full-time attorney outside
wow.
of our work together
Wow.
as writing partners. So, seeing how she showed up, or shows up every day rather, and then also feeling like as her partner that I need to show up in that way for her. Again, it wasn't without growing pains, but
Right.
it was really like it helped me decide, right? It's like I have two paths in life, right? Like I could go and try to be the best partner to this person I can be, and also realize that will also equal me showing up the best for myself, or I can just not take things as seriously and take it as it comes and be, you know, flowing as if you will. I
Hmm.
mean, again, I'm still free flowing, but there's a lot of structure in the free flowingness,
Gotcha.
which for me has become great.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, as you're moving forward, how do you see Leading Normal Productions evolving in the coming years? Are there any upcoming projects aside from the film you're currently working on that you're especially excited about?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the goal, like any other company, is to continue to grow,
Hmm.
continue to put out films that, we're so excited about, and, continue to work with partners. That's the thing is, as you work with other companies and you meet other people, you kind of realize that everyone brings something unique to the table and things
Yeah.
that would normally, not be there. And in terms of projects, we have a lot of exciting horror projects that we're really excited about. One of those projects is, probably one of my dream projects. It's a love letter to 80s slasher films called They Still Die. I'm working with the incredible Eileen Davidson and Anna Marie Davidson. Eileen Davidson is a scream queen. She's an incredible
Nice.
person, and her and Anna Marie are incredible writers. And we were at the time we were with the same agent, and our agent knew our love for slashers, and she was like, I got something for you. And when we got it, it was like, oh my God, it's like, talk about a dream project. So we're in development on that one and starting to take that project out. And then I have a couple of projects where I'm executive producing, where I have not written, not directing. And one of them I'm so thrilled about. It's called Lil. It's the Lillian Harden Armstrong biopic. So that's Louis Armstrong. They call him
Okay.
Louis Louis. He had the way he preferred to be called. It's the story of his second wife, who so many people don't know and don't realize was really the heart behind that band. And really,
Oh,
I
wow.
don't believe he would have had that career that he has if not for her. She
Hmm.
knew how to copyright songs and how to read contracts and all these things. And, as an African American woman at the time, never really got the rub, and
Yeah.
people really didn't give her her flowers, I feel like. So, that
That's amazing.
story had
Yeah.
come to me. I was actually originally supposed to just consult on the script. And, when I read it, I was like, hey, yeah, there's a couple of things that, we can work on and double down on and refine. But it was one of the most beautiful scripts I had read in I can't remember how long. And the woman who wrote it, Ellen Dolan's such an incredible human being. Had such an incredible career in soap operas, has only worked in soap operas her entire life as an actor, and then wrote this script because she just felt like she had to tell this story. And like I said, when I read it, I was so drawn to it.
Oh,
I said, hey, I would love to be a part of helping you get this out there, because I think the people need to read this story. So that's another one that we're working on getting out there. And I'm currently in talks with a really incredible company that works in this space. So, it's just, it's taking it day by day, looking forward, obviously, on what our goals are, but just also to really trying to enjoy step by step.
yeah.
Again, for us as a company, this feels like our upcoming project feels like our first in a way, even though we've done so many things, because it's like our first like major feature together as a unit. So, I'm really trying to be present with that because,
Hmm.
it's coming up soon. And I also realize like things feel like they're gone in a blink of an eye, right? Like you're like, oh my
That's
God, I
true.
blinked and
Yeah.
it's over.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm really trying to just enjoy the process.
Yeah. That's very true. And good for you for being present in that moment and knowing that. So, and getting to enjoy that.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
One last question for you. And
Please.
so is there a message or a theme that you hope resonates with your viewers after they watch a Leaving Normal production project?
Yes, I would say that know that that project, anything that we do we had a great time and there was a lot of love.
Okay.
And also, it's the product of people that have worked very hard,
Yeah.
right? Like nothing was given to us. Anything that you see was really the work of an incredible, hardworking team of people that goes so beyond just our company. It's every single person that comes on board, right? Everything from our
Hmm.
production assistants, our interns, the other producers, really everyone comes together just with a big open heart. And what I love about the projects we do, not only is everybody so good at what they do, but everybody is so kind and so great. So like when you walk
Gotcha.
away from the experience, you're like, man, you know what? Maybe the days were long and I was like a zombie some days on set, but you know what? I had a great time and I learned. And the thing that I always try to instill to every crew member, like I was just had a meeting right before this podcast. about a young man who's going to come on our project just to shadow. He's a fresh graduate from school and he's just going to be absorbing. And he says, well, what's your approach? I said, hey man, think of everything as service. I said, for me, when I was you, all the way up to as a director, like everything we do is in service of the story. So if you look at everything you do as like, hey, I'm here to serve. I said, I promise you will get something back. And I think it's so much more of a richer experience versus what can I take? Think, what can I give?
I like that. There's your nugget for this episode, everyone. If you want to take one thing away, it's right there.
Cool. Absolutely. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And appreciate your guys' time.
Yes. Thank you, Rob, for sharing your journey and your impactful work. And to our listeners, be sure to check out Rob's projects. Go to leavingnormalprod.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, you got it, man.
All right, leavingnormalprod.com. And stay tuned for more conversations like these on The Support of Ambition.